Paul's letters. There are 13 letters written by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. Romans 1 and 2, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 and 2 Thessalonians, 1 and 2 Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. These letters generally run from longest to shortest in the New Testament canon, the New Testament collection. Now, over the years, some have wondered if Hebrews might also have been written by Paul. Although there are some similarities with Paul's letters, it seems unlikely from Hebrews itself, as we'll see, that Paul was the author. So 13 letters of Paul. 9 of them addressed to churches, and 4 of them addressed to individuals. Paul wrote these letters over a period of some 15 years to churches and individuals separated by thousands of kilometers. Many of the churches that Paul writes to were actually started by his own missionary activity. Notice that these New Testament letters of Paul get their titles, their names, from the letters' recipients. So sometimes the individuals who were written to, like Timothy or Titus or Philemon, but often the location of those who first received the letters. Now, mention is made of other letters Paul wrote here in these letters, but they didn't make it into the New Testament canon, and they've now been lost to us today. Notice that the letters of Paul generally follow the standard form of a letter from the first century. They begin with the sender's name and their office, their title, then the name of the recipient who's being written to, and a brief greeting or a wish of some sort. That's then followed by the main body of the letter, and then right at the end you have a farewell and a closing greeting. So that was the standard way to write a letter in Paul's day, and that's pretty much what Paul does in his letters. Paul also appears to follow the usual procedure of that time, which was to use a scribe. Sometimes the scribe is called an amanuensis. The destination of Paul's letters. Well, please see the map that I've given you in your notes for the different locations of congregations that Paul was writing to. An overview of the 13 letters of Paul. Please find the table that I've given you in your notes, which give an overview of these 13 letters of Paul. And you'll notice that there's one column that is blank and it needs to be filled in. And it's an important one because these are the letters themselves. So notice in that column, that blank column, letters at the top there, the first space, the first blank space, please write there Galatians. So Galatians was written in around about 48 to 49 AD. It was written at the end of the first missionary journey, and it's been labelled as a polemical letter. A polemic is a controversial argument. And you'll see that John Stott, from whom I've got this table, says that in Galatians, Christ is presented as the liberator. Go to the second blank space in that column and write there 1 and 2 Thessalonians. So we can see that these letters were probably written between 50 and 52 AD during the second missionary journey of Paul. These have been called the early letters, and they tell us about Christ, the coming judge. Go to the next blank space, and please write 1 and 2 Corinthians and Romans in that space. These letters were written between 53 and 57 AD during Paul's third missionary journey. Sometimes these have been referred to as the major letters just because they're the longer letters. And here in those letters we see Christ presented as the Saviour. Move down to the next blank space in that column and write Colossians, Philemon, Ephesians, and Philippians. So these letters were written in 60 to 62 AD or thereabouts during Paul's first imprisonment in Rome, where we find him in Acts 28. They're often referred to as the prison letters. And here Christ is presented as the supreme Lord. And then that final blank space at the bottom of the table, please put there 1 Timothy and Titus and 2 Timothy. These letters were probably written between 62 and 67 AD. During Paul's release after his first imprisonment and then during his second imprisonment. And they're often referred to as the pastoral letters. And here we see Christ being presented as the head of the church.